Hello,
So,
other members. So back to this definition. What I thought was important about this is identifying someone's tendency, or you could substitute that with the word preference. Some people have a preference or a habit for thinking creatively, and other people have a very profound skill set for being creative, even if they don't have that as a preference. And then creativity is really defined by the situation. It's defined by the parameters or the limitations or the problem that's in front of you. And so you definitely need some sort of closed world, as I've heard it called, or just a defined situation. And one of the ways I wanted to have us identify types of creativity is through some movies and TV shows that I love. So the first clip that we're going to watch to talk about is from Inception. And when I found this clip, I couldn't believe that Inception was 12 years old. Uh, and I don't know if anybody else is like that, but that happens to me frequently. So in this clip, this sort of identifies creativity as a way that we might think of it more as almost like superhuman critical thinking or severe problem solving. In this clip, if you haven't seen Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, right here next to Michael Caine, is looking for a young student that is capable of building dream worlds and building worlds that solve a particular problem. So creating a design that facilitates actions on certain people. So we have a defined situation, and he needs someone very creative to help solve those problems. And this is a role that they call the architect.
I need an architect who's as good as I was.
I've got somebody better.
Ariadne? I'd like you to meet Mr. Cobb.
Pleased to meet you.
If you have a few moments, Mr. Cobb has a job offer he'd like to discuss with you.
Work placement?
Not exactly. I have a test for you.
You're not going to tell me anything about this first?
Before I describe the job, I have to know you can do it.
Why?
It's not, strictly speaking, legal. You have 2 minutes to design a maze that it takes 1 minute to solve. Stop. Again. Stop. It's gonna have to be better than that. That's what I like.
So what I took away from that clip is the set of parameters that were given to her. You have 2 minutes to draw a maze that it takes me 1 minute to solve, and the amount of exploration that was happening to actually solve that problem. There wasn't really an environment that was conducive to, developing a spirit of creativity. It was very much an environment that was, you have a problem to solve. In the next clip from one of my most favorite TV shows,
I need an architect who's as...
is from the show Who Is It Anyways? This is one of my favorite shows simply because of the amount of fun that people have exploring entertaining possibilities just to have a really fun time and to be entertaining. So we're going to see some similar elements here, though. There's going to be a structure to a game, but what we're going to be taking away from it is a comparison to how these two types of creativities are different.
First game's called Questions Only, and this is for everybody. Wayne and Colin are going to start. In this game, they can only speak in questions. They can only ask each other questions, nothing else, and they have to keep the story going. And I'll buzz them out if one of them makes a mistake or it takes so long to think of a question, and then if they make a mistake, the other guy will take their place. Your scene is you're on an international flight. You're on an international flight, and take it away whenever you're ready.
Tea? Could I have some coffee instead?
Would you like some creamer?
Is it natural?
Oh my God, what's that?
Shouldn't you know?
Who do you think I am anyway?
Well, aren't you the stewardess?
Let me get the captain.
Someone wanted to see the captain.
Could you take me to Cuba?
You know where that is?
Isn't that the little spleen-shaped island?
I think it's shaped like a boot.
Does anyone aboard have a bomb?
What would it look like?
Have you ever seen a drawing of a bomb such as this?
No.
Why are you wearing your life vest?
Do I look like something's gonna happen? Oh, what do you want from me?
Will you take your clothes off?
Can you handle it?
Are you in first class?
Somebody order a juggler?
How many balls can you juggle?
Is that a come-on?
Is that a clip-on?
Philip Ramsey?
Ramsey Phillips? How the hell are you? Where have you been?
What have you been up to?
Weren't you in prison?
Did you marry Sheila?
You heard?
She didn't tell you about me?
Were you the masked avenger she was talking about?
Ecuador.
What? Ecuador?
What made you say Ecuador?
Didn't you ask for a map?
Didn't I say I wanted a Labrador?
You smell smoke.
Is that my cologne?
Are you wearing essence of smoke?
Let me get the captain.
Where have you been?
I don't... Oh.
Couldn't find him?
I don't...
Where have you been?
Did anything happen while I was gone?
Haven't you noticed the whole place is on fire?
Why should I?
Aren't you in charge here?
Is it in my job description?
What is your job description?
Can you read this?
Big Goofy?
Thank you very much.
So what I take from that clip is a couple different comparison items. This is kind of creativity that is associated more with the power to generate ideas that entertain rather than solve a certain problem. And I laugh every time I see this clip, but what I also see is the participants starting in a way just to follow the rules. It's almost just like they're doing their best to adjust their thinking so that they can follow the parameters that were given to them, just ask questions. And eventually, after they get into a little bit of a groove, the goal changes from just being able to follow the rules to actually finding a way to throw off the participant that they're playing with. They moved from just finding a way to continue the narrative to being able to have more fun and actually play a game with it and throw each other off.
First game's called Question.
And what I really think that we're talking about in the difference between these two is, do our activities that we use with our students, do they foster more of a spirit of creativity? Or do they actually offer essential skills that help them actually create something or solve a problem? And usually the activities that we have, there's always a sharing. There's always a little bit of spirit, or there's always a little bit of skills. But really, as a teacher, this is a really good question to ask yourself when you're asking your students to be creative is, am I building an environment that helps them increase their preference for being creative, but also am I giving them concrete tools that help them build something? Because usually whatever kind of teacher you are, just generally, we have a bias for one or the other. And it's a good reminder that our students might need different things depending on their personality, or also the level of knowledge that they have at any one point. So when you develop a spirit for a student, you're just increasing their preference for it. And when you develop their skills, you're actually giving them some tools in order to create. As I've done research over the past few years and talked with other teachers that intentionally develop creative skills, we have found that there are principles that we share. The first is actually reproduction. So the first step to being creative is actually reproducing what other creative people have done, at least especially in art and in music. And for us, repertoire counts as reproduction. We think of composers as very creative people, whether they think of themselves as problem solvers or divine artists, it doesn't really matter. They're creative, and we reproduce what they have written. And repertoire can be seen as a really, really good tool to give students knowledge in order to create, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The second tool is listening. This might seem a little bit obvious, but this is really listening that is, or activities that involve listening that are not really associated with anything else. So listening for its own sake and active listening. There's a lot of different types of listening, but what I'm really talking about is absorbing ideas through the critical listening of others, whether that's a pop song or some studio mate's performance or your demonstration in the lesson. That kind of active critical listening is absolutely critical to creative music making. Something I've touched on before would be limitations. We can't really have a creative environment if you're allowed to do whatever you want. The more freedom you have, really the less creative you are, because the more limitations it seems to be, or the more closed a world is, the more creative a product is. So that's why we think of fugues as being some of the most creative types of music or forms that we have in music, because of how many rules a composer sets on themselves. So from a compositional standpoint, a fugue is very virtuosic, simply because of how amazing it is that a composer found a way to create something with so many limitations. And then lastly, creativity really needs collaboration. In pedagogy classes, I always say that the best thing about private lessons is that they're one-on-one, and the worst thing about private lessons, is that they're one-on-one. And usually students need some sort of collaboration with their peers to help cement some creative ideas and also give them an environment that's different than the one they have with their teacher. In today's session, I'm really just going to be focusing on limitations or structure or constraints, however we want to describe it. And I'm asking myself, what kind of activities can we incorporate into our regular teaching toolkit that will increase a student's creative spirit and their skills? So, when I think about limitations and structure, this is really where the title came from, Opposites Attract. Structure and creativity can seemingly be opposites in a lot of environments. But structure is actually what creates creativity. It's what enables creativity. Since another way that we could define it is creativity is about exploring the possibilities within a certain framework. So that framework is really what helps us connect to what a product actually is. And it also helps us as teachers guide our students' thinking, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The structure that we use for activities really points our students in a direction, and we get to sort of choose what direction that is. In terms of creative people that I admire, or people that we all know, we see how important structure is to developing creativity. Even the late, great Chick Corea has this wonderful quote that is, within improvisation, there are decisions that have to be made of what kind of freedoms you want and what kind of rules. And that speaks to the limitations that are required. Ernest Hemingway used to do a fun activity where he would challenge his friends to make up stories that only use 6 words, which is a torturous activity, but it would certainly develop your creativity. And the famous one that he has is a story in 6 words that is for sale, colon, baby shoes, comma, never worn, period. Which is a very powerful idea, a powerful story told in 6 words. And even our good friend Brahms, Johannes Brahms, loved to ask his good friends to send him counterpoint exercises that would be increasingly difficult so that he could I would call them brain teasers, compositional brain teasers, to help give him more facility in being creative. So that's why we focus on limitations. What I want to focus on now, though, is the difference between, at least how I define it, the difference between freedom, structure, and creativity. When I speak of freedom, I speak of the choices that we give our students before we've actually even introduced or built for them an activity. So, for instance, asking a student, would you like to write a theme that sounds more like winning the lottery or saying goodbye to a best friend? Before we choose a direction, giving them some sort of choice for it. Freedom is the same choice where if it's time for them to play a sonatina, we might give them 4 or 5 options. That's what I would refer to as freedom. And then structure and creativity are built after that. When it comes to meeting your own students' needs, everybody has a different personal need for structure. This is really a student's preference for how much structure they think their activities need to have. And this preference can come from a lot of different factors. It could come from the educational environment of their school, the personalities of their family, their home environment, their previous piano instructor. All of these sort of factors dictate whether they need a high structure or a low structure. When a student really needs high structure, and some of you might have students like this, they feel more self-conscious when they're asked to brainstorm or explore ideas in real time. They have a desire for right answers and wrong answers, as opposed to discovery learning, where we're just thinking of ideas. In certain situations, a student with the high need for structure feels uncomfortable or insecure about what's happening. And I don't think our job is to change them. It's to just meet them where they are and provide a structure that can still make them feel capable of being creative. So this all really just leads us to developing some skills that help us be adaptable. I think creative activities can meet every student's needs. It's really just how much structure do we need? Is my student really comfortable having less structure? Or do we need a very specific small road to walk on that the student is directed in? We could have a conversation about this with whether it would be better to give a student an improv exercise versus a composition exercise, because those kind of go from opposite ends. One involves way more exploring, and one involves less real time and more critical thinking, you could say. So those are just tools for being creative. When we design activities, my general preference, especially if I don't know the student really well, is to go from a high structure activity to a low structure activity. And this is really just providing them with a lot of rules or instructions, whether it's guided by a concept from a piece, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here. How do we design an activity that's stealing things from a piece of repertoire? And it's also guided by a student's learning preferences. Sometimes you don't need to go as high of a structure at first because you know your student is naturally creative, or that's their preference at least. And you can eventually develop them into being okay with lower structure environments. So the questions I'm asking when I think of designing an activity is, how much limitation, how much constraint does a student need in order for them to learn the most? Do they prefer more structure for a certain concept or less structure? Does more structure make them feel boxed in, or does it make them feel safe? Those are the questions I'm sort of asking for my students. So let's get into some examples. Let's get into things that are a little more practical. Since repertoire is really the bread and butter of traditional piano lessons, I certainly understand the hesitancy of incorporating creative activities because it can take away time from repertoire. And we don't always want to do that. And so usually my creative activities are all based on repertoire that students are actually playing at the moment. So when I assign repertoire or when I offer choices to students, I have a different lens of looking at a piece in addition to, the primary pedagogical concepts in a piece. I'm also thinking, what elements of the music can I steal? I prefer the word steal because I'm truly reimagining it in a different context. I'm not borrowing it and giving it back. I'm stealing it. And then what patterns can I reuse for a student's benefit? I also think that repertoire, like we talked about in the category of reproduction, repertoire is our biggest bridge from a student reproducing creative products, pieces, and also being able to think to themselves, maybe I could do this one day, is to actually build on the composers that we actually love to give our students. So I'm going to show you an example from what I hope are two common pieces for you. The first is Takatina by Dmitri Kabalevsky, which is an early intermediate piece. And another one which is from Royal Conservatory of Music Repertoire Level 2, called The Silent Moon by Nancy Telfer. And I'm going to show you one that's a composition exercise and one that's more of an improv exercise. But I'm going to show you how these can be used a little bit for developing the spirit of creativity, but also some skills at the same time. So looking at this Takatina, what I love about this piece is that the patterns that Kabalevsky composes this piece with make it sound a little bit harder than it actually is, and it makes the student be able to learn the piece a little bit more quickly. And what I mean by that is the right hand is all first inversion chords. The left hand is always playing a legato melodic line. And at least for the first thematic area up to what I have written there, everybody is on white keys. So these are also the elements that I would actually want to bring to the students' attention and have them try to come up with something by themselves. So what I want to talk about now is, let's pretend that you have one of your students. Think of any particular student that you have and ask yourself the question, how much structure do you think that they would need? Do you think that you would be able to give them an assignment like this, write a 12-bar melody for the left hand using only white keys, and then add a right hand accompaniment using first inversion chords? Would this be enough direction for your student, or would they need more? Or would this actually be maybe even constricting for them? In my experience, this is probably the least amount of structure that a student would need. Everybody that I teach, at least, would love a little bit more direction, because there's too many possibilities just with those parameters that I've given. So perhaps we would add something like number 3, where I would give them the freedom to choose a different affect, a different mood or character than the Kabalevsky, to say we want it to sound like a rainy day, a sunny day. We want it to sound like the hopscotch that you played during recess. We want it to sound like the last day of school. We want it to sound like saying goodbye to a friend. However you want to actually give them a prompt that gives them some sort of idea. And then if that's not even enough, then you might actually give them a notated prompt that is gives them the ability to actually start from somewhere that incorporates the affects that you actually addressed. So potentially a sunny day sounding like this. That sounds a little similar to the toccata, but it still is a little bit different. It's different enough. Or if you have something where you directed the student to say, why don't we make this sound lonely? Then it could end up prompting them with something like this. And then maybe they would actually have to complete the second phrase. So I try to prepare high structure environments before I meet with a student, because it's so much easier to take away structure than it is to add structure in the moment. I don't really want to improvise more structure for a student. If you have to, you have to. But when you prep for these activities, imagine the highest structure that you would need, and then take whatever away that you might need to based on your student. And then you're most likely always prepared to meet a student's needs. For Nancy Telfer's piece with the Silent Moon, I'll actually play the beginning of this for you. So what I love about this is that we have a left-hand ostinato and an absolutely beautiful melodic structure that I can expose to the student and have them copy. So the structure that I see and the questions I might help a student lead them to realize this is, in the first phrase, do we start and end on the same note or different notes? And it would be the same. And then do we have a unique or singular high point in the melody? And then they would hopefully find measure 5, that first note in the G. And I would say, yeah, this is kind of shaped like a mountain. You have a low point, we have one single peak, and we go back down to where we started. And that's as much structure as I really need to give them for them to create a melody that has some sort of energy and ebb and flow. So the assignment that I would start with is we're going to steal Nancy's original left-hand ostinato pattern, and we're going to improvise right-hand melodies that have a distinct high point and a distinct low point. And if we need to actually have more structure than that, this would be, since it's an improv activity, then it would be just about demonstrating that. And for improv, the goal is different than composition, or maybe I shouldn't say the goal, but the point of focus is a little bit different. Instead of thinking, did what we create just sound good, the question really needs to be, oh wow, I just came up with that. What else can I come up with? And that's it. It's not really a question of was that good or was that bad. It was just, what else can I come up with? And sometimes students can get really hung up on the idea of, I created something amazing, or I created something that I think sounds like trash. And honestly, I have to say, none of that really matters. You just have to focus on the next possibility that you can think of. And that helps them objectify the experience a little bit too, and become better generators of ideas, since that's part of what defines creativity. In this specific activity, I would probably notate it for them like this. If you're familiar with Forrest Kinney, he has a structure for improv activities that I use in improv as well, which is essentially, you have two sections to your improv. You have the main section, and then you have what he would call the vacation. So when you are improvising in the main section, and it feels like there's time for a change, go to the vacation, go to the B section, and then when it feels like it's time to go back to the A section. So what I took from the Silent Moon was the left-hand ostinato. And in order to get a B section, I just lowered everybody by a whole step. And I think this is a pattern that would be really easy for a student to recreate. Because what I don't want to do is create an improv exercise that ends up just turning into a left-hand etude, where they have to work on an accompaniment pattern that's just too difficult to play anything with. We want that left-hand pattern to be interesting, but not a barrier to creating with the right hand. So you might actually even just have them play whole notes of those chords if you want to. That's crunchy enough for them to be interested. And then everybody down. There's no reason that it couldn't be that either. The other one that I really enjoy doing is giving students the opportunity to write theme and variations. When I first started incorporating composition more frequently into lessons, I did a bad thing, which was I wanted my students to write whole pieces. And it just took too long, or both of us got burnt out before we made it to a double bar line. Theme and variations are a really good gateway to writing longer pieces because they're so nicely segmented. As soon as you finish a variation, it doesn't take more than a week or two necessarily. And if you need to pause and wait to add something, it's just a really good way of pacing everything out. My go-to way of assigning theme and variations is to steal the character or mood from the repertoire that my students are working on. So if they're working on, let's say, 3 or 4 pieces, and one of them is maybe elegant and graceful, and the next one is energetic and a little bit dissonant or grotesque, and then another one is ethereal, maybe more impressionistic. We just steal those characteristics, and that's what guides them into writing variations. The question for your particular student, and maybe you can think of the student you did before, is this a student that would need you to write a theme for them? Do you need to give them a theme? Or would they be comfortable actually writing one for themselves? My student Louisa, since this was not her first compositional exercise, she elected to write her own theme, and I gave her different prompts for that theme, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we stole all the affects and characteristics from her repertoire for separate variations. And I'll bet that you can actually hear, I would hope, that you can hear the characteristics from her repertoire in her variations. And I would hope that you would actually be able to guess that maybe Louisa is working on an invention, because one of her variations is supposed to be a conversation between her hands. And I thought she did a pretty good job. So here's Louisa's theme and variations. so hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the things that we took from her repertoire. And if we had more time, we could talk about the variations and how sometimes, not for all of them, but sometimes we would look at one of her pieces and we would say, you know what, this is a really cool texture right here. Why don't you find a way to use this in the third variation or something? So I don't really necessarily demand for something like this a whole lot of originality. I really just want to coach them into feeling comfortable being creative this way. That creativity sometimes involves borrowing ideas from people, and usually the more we do that, the more comfortable we feel coming up with our own ideas at the same time. When I think about my own students and the activities, I want to ask what their motivation is too. Are they motivated more to explore, or are they more motivated to follow rules? And no matter how you choose to describe your students, do they have more of a spirit? Do they have more skills? Maybe they are lacking in both. At the end of the day, when you assign an activity, another question I want to ask is, does the student really know how to assess themselves when they're doing these activities? Do they know what success looks like, and have you defined that for them? And that's why I am so gung-ho about improv not being about right or wrong or good or bad. What I want to be successful for a student is that they come up, whenever they think they're done coming up with ideas, saying, I bet you can come up with one more. And if you do, that's successful. And then in the composition exercises, it's simply finding a way that we think is more effective. And that might mean that we look at the melody and we say, you know what, this is pretty cool, but what happens if we change these 3 notes? Does that mean it sounds better, or does that sound worse? And I try not to give them my tastes, but I want to try to give them options and open doors that they haven't thought of before. So what guides me is what's effective here, not what does Andy want to hear, or what do I think sounds good. We try to stay away from that language, and we try to just say what's effective. What would an audience member like to hear? That's usually the guidance that we think about. When it comes to skills, so these are some of the handouts that I give to my students that I've written, and maybe it would actually be, I don't know if you, Chris, should I zoom in?
Yeah, we can't. I mean, we can read the large words, but the little words are tough to read.
Let's do it this way. I will just zoom in this way. Did I lose it, or can you see it?
I can read them. Can you all read them? Okay. Fantastic.
So I'll move to the second half in a second, but whenever I assign a composition exercise, I want them listening critically, like we talked about how listening is important, and listening for, do you like this melody, or do you like this chord progression? Obviously, I want them to develop taste, but also I want to give them some good objective parameters. So good melodies don't come out of the sky. They weren't given to us from Mount Olympus. They do share certain characteristics. And so these are the hard skills that I try to give my students, which is that melodies should have a direction. We should always know whether we're increasing energy or decreasing energy. And usually they have a single high point and a single low point. Good melodies, I use Happy Birthday as an example. Good melodies find a way to selectively repeat elements of that. Happy Birthday has a repeated melody. It has some expanding intervals. It's a really good melody example to show students. And then when we get to, I'll zoom back here. one that's a little bit harder for them to understand, but it's still good to plant the seed, is that good melodies are usually easy to sing. So that means that you don't want to have a melody that goes 3 octaves up all of a sudden, or is a melody that's made up only of sevenths. You know, usually we have steps, stepwise motion, with a nicely well-timed larger leap. And that's, you know, the push to go in. And then lastly is establish a pattern and then break that pattern. So repeat a bunch of stuff and then, you know, have the listener expect for it to be repeated again, but then throw us a curveball. That's what a good melody is made up of. So those are that's one handout that I give. And another one has to do with when we're maybe moving towards not a melodic idea, but more of a motivic idea, something that's much harder to sing. I have this one on developing a motive, which essentially just gives them the tools to think of how can I use one idea a million different ways. And these reminders keep their ideas flowing throughout the week, because what I don't like giving them the image of is maybe the romanticized view of a creative composer, which is that they're sitting at the piano for hours agonizing over ideas to come up with. Not really. We're just talking about pretty basic usable ideas. So just for the sake of time, those are the skill sections that I wanted to address here too. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. It is so wonderful to be able to talk about this with interested parties and actually some practitioners of creative music making. So thanks, Chris, for having me, and thanks to the whole entire Knoxville area for being with me this morning. Yeah, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, so much. This is Cynthia here. I want to thank you. That is, for a lot of us, that is teaching outside the box, definitely. But it's wonderful for teachers who want to inspire a little more creativity in their students. So thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We all do. Thank you.
Does he have publications where he's documented these ideas?
Yes. In fact, it's sold on Amazon. So all you do is go to Amazon and put in his name, and it comes up. Yeah.
Very good.
Already looked it up, Andy. Looks like a great book.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and have a short business meeting. Thank you again, Andy. Really appreciate it. Chris, you want to say
Thank you, guys.
something?
Great to be here.
Thanks again for doing this really provocative presentation.
Yes.
And yeah, well, I definitely am going to use a lot of this. And thanks again for taking the time to meet with us. So one more round of applause.
Yay! Great job.
Great to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, who is here? Let's see. Is Pat and David and Lisa? Or is they the only ones? And Colleen?
Maybe do you want to change the seats a little bit, or?
Yeah. What do you mean?
I don't know.
Change the seats.
They can put it in a circle or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, it won't take long.
Okay.
It won't take long. Okay. Yeah. I will pull my chair out though. So I can sit over here. So that I can see my gorgeous face. Okay, first of all, good news, and David, you're gonna love this. We have a place for the honors recital.
Yeah.
It is written in blood now. So, yeah, signed in blood. Sunday, April 24th at West Park Baptist Church. So, thank you, West Park. And planned for 2 recitals. We have the church from 2 to 5. And I'm hoping we can start our first recital at 2. I need to check with Darla over there at the church to make sure that everyone will be out in plenty of time for people to come in for the 2 o'clock recital.
What was the date again?
April 24th, Sunday afternoon. It's a beautiful church. Really nice. Okay, so I don't know if we're going to have 2 recitals. It depends on how many students will be playing, but I imagine we will. Okay, also a reminder to everyone to get KMTA applications into Laura Harmon by this coming Monday, the 21st.
Oh my goodness.
And well, from what I understand, all we need to do is really to get our theory in line. She doesn't need to know the performance pieces yet, just the theory test. So that's all you need to worry about at this point. Then the teachers this year will be giving theory tests to their own students. Does anybody have a problem with that? Okay.
No, we can't unmute our videos. That the host has made it so we don't have video, but I guess we can make audio. But
let me see if maybe I can fix that. You should be able to start your video now.
Oh, good. Thanks, Chris.
Hi, David.
And thanks for working out the honors recital. That's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're right. We really need to have one. I think at that point I was very frustrated. I've been dragged along for so long and not knowing until the last minute, and then finding out we could not get a church. So, yeah, I was kind of ready to give up. But perseverance paid off.
Nice.
So we've got it. And I have a question for you, David, or Unsa. Will practice rooms be open for students to use on those days? Do you know?
I think so.
For the auditions. And that will be, of course, April. Oh, gosh, I wrote it down.
Is it 9 and 10?
Yes, thank you. 9 and 10. Totally forgot that. Yeah, that'll be that weekend.
Well, most of the practice rooms with the upright pianos are normally left unlocked. There's a big hallway of grand pianos that normally are locked, but we could try to arrange to leave them unlocked.
Okay, I don't know. Do we need the grand pianos for practice rooms? Yeah, probably. Okay.
David, do you know if there's any festivals or events are going on that weekend at UT?
I don't know. We'll have to check the calendar.
Yeah, okay. Oh.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Oh, great. Another challenge that we can think about. Yeah, let's hope not. Do you know what those room numbers are?
For the grand pianos? No, not right offhand. It's just when you go down to the ground floor and you're facing the library entrance, if you go over to the right and then down the hall to the left, it's that whole wing is like the piano major grand piano rooms.
Oh, good. Okay. And one of the things I think I'd ask you, David, if you would take care of this to make sure the rooms are all unlocked, so that we can get into the building and we can get into the rooms that we need. Would you agree to take that on?
Right. And so can you review which rooms it is you need to, I know there's my room and Unsuk's room and which was.
I'm hoping Chilong's room too, because turns out Marianne needs room, was it 25? Yeah, for strings. And she doesn't want to share that with Rachel's vocals. So I needed to find another place for Rachel to have her vocals. And so I guess Chulong's office will be for that. I've emailed him. I just have not heard back. I'm sure he'll be fine with it. And in room 25, which Marianne will use, maybe we can use that also as a lunchroom. So I don't know that we need another lunchroom. Are there chairs in that room? I think there are, or desks or something. In room
Um,
25?
if that's one of the classrooms, there would be chairs there.
Okay, okay, that would be fine. I don't think we need a separate lunchroom, do you? Yeah. I do need volunteers. I know not everyone is here today, so I'll probably just send out an email about this because we'll need registration, 2 each day. We'll need monitors, 2 for performance, 1 for strings, and 1 for the vocals, and multiply that by 2 days. A runner, and also, I know what it was I'd ask you to do, David, to make sure that the maintenance sets up tables and chairs. Because we'll need 3 chairs per office, 1 for the monitor and then for parents, and then chairs and a table for registration downstairs.
So chairs outside each of the audition rooms for monitors, and then a table and chairs in the lobby for registration.
Yes, yes. Thank you. And I think that's it. Is there anything I'm missing?
In the past,
Yeah.
sometimes they had like a little, I don't know, what you call it, refreshment room for the judges and
Yes.
stuff.
Thank you, Shirley. What do y'all think about that? Is there a room we can use where the judges can come and get coffee, the monitors too?
And the volunteers too, yeah.
And the volunteers, yeah.
Yeah, we can just ask for another room.
Isn't there a room right off where the office is? Isn't there a room on the other side of that hallway that's it's got a copier or something in it? Is there a table or someplace in there we can use for? I think there's also a refrigerator in there.
Yeah, that's the workroom where the photocopying machine is. If
That work is a refreshment.
But that's inside the sort of the office suite where we're supposed to keep that door locked all the time. It would be
Okay.
usually like when we have auditions here for prospective students, we usually have one whole room down on the ground floor where the classrooms are that's designated for refreshments. So what if we instead of using Marianne's string room, what if we have a whole nother room that could be for refreshments and lunch?
That would be great. What room would that be? Do you know?
I'll have to go down and look. I mean, we could just make it next to 25, hopefully. I can go down and look. I'll see where
Okay.
25 is, and then I'll ask for another room next to it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So let me write that down. Refreshment room. Yeah, we're going to need our coffee. If you want us to be nice to the students. Anything else? No?
So did you already ask for those rooms from Jeff Pappas, the director?
He did tell us we could have the room 25. And he said that's the only room that he would have that we could use. So I don't know if he meant that there's not another one we could also use, because I just needed one room at the time. So I don't know. There may be
Okay. Okay.
Do I need to check with him? I can send him an email about that.
Well, or I can do that.
Okay. If you don't mind, that'd be great.
Okay.
And if anyone has students who would be willing to work as volunteers too, that would be great.
It used to be that everybody who had somebody in the, had students in the auditions were expected to work one time or else find a substitute if they couldn't. They either had to work for theory or auditions. Now that we don't have the theory event, I guess not as many workers are needed, but still everybody who has students in it should be willing to help out.
Absolutely, yeah. And I figure because we're going over 2 days, I don't want teachers to have to work 2 days unless we absolutely need them. So we're talking probably 10 to 12 volunteers. When we're thinking registration, monitors, runner, for over 2 days. So, yeah. So anyway, just be thinking about if you have any students who would want to do that. And I will send out an email and see who will step up to the plate for that. Anything else? Are we done? Meeting
guess so.
adjourned. Boom.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for all your work, and Chris too.
Yes, Chris. Yay, Chris. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of it, huh?
I can't believe I didn't think about a refreshment room.
Yeah.
Duh.
There you go.
That's the most important room in the whole thing.
Especially for your guests, your judges and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they gotta have their water and their coffee and
Just a place to get them.
They would have like, I don't know, like a little, fruit or
yeah.
something kind of like a little
Sneak on
breakfast.
around
Sure.
here.
Sure. And then have the lunch, delivered in there.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. Panera bread.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, let's do it right. Right? Chris, would you like me to return all this today?
Oh no, I can get it. I don't have anything today, so
Oh, you
I
don't?
will take it. I will take it all back.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a student coming at 1:30, and then I need to pick up the order for Laura for festival tomorrow.
I know. So what's
Going on?
what is that even entail? What am I going to be doing? I was asked to judge because the judge couldn't make it. So when
Are you gonna do that?
Be there.
You're gonna
What
do
do I
that?
need to do for that? Can you give me some advice?
Did you not get the email
I
from
did.
Laura?
I did.
Did everybody get there by 8:30?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I think one piece of advice I would give, or it's more of a question or request, and I think Cheryl will agree with me on this, that in the past, the judges have been very forgiving.
Okay.
Laura is so interested in the children's
Chris,
oh, okay.
Yes.
can Chris delete the meeting?
Oh, you want me to? Okay. Yes. I'll turn it
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, it
Thanks,
won't let me do it,
everybody.
and I have to set it up for
Oh
somebody
yes.
else.
Yes.
Thank-
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Colleen.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Brute. See you later.
Yeah, thank you for coming.